I've been using this phone. I've been using this iPhone 15 Pro Max. I've been using this iPhone 15 Pro Max for 6 months now, and I've got some thoughts. It's hard to believe that the iPhone 15 Pro Max has been with us for 6 months now. Now, I'm not going to sit here today and talk about why I'm not switching to a much better smartphone because, well, I've done that enough and you're bored of it. Instead, I'm going to talk about what the iPhone 15 Pro Max is like to live with for half a year, how it stacks up to the smartphones that I've reviewed since this went on sale, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and the big thing that keeps rearing its head that I cannot look past. This is a fascinating release from Apple for a number of reasons. This is a fascinating release from Apple for a number of reasons. Let's just get into it. It has been quite a hectic start to the year for new smartphone releases, but it's worth bearing in mind that I don't review every single smartphone that hits the market because I don't have the time. So the list of phones I'm about to compare against the iPhone 15 Pro Max might seem a bit odd, but I don't care. The first is the Pixel 8 Pro, and for me, the Pixel 8 Pro wins because of that camera system. The camera performance of a smartphone is very subjective, as I always say, but for me, I've always preferred the Pixel photos. Next up, we have the Honor 90, which was my smartphone of the year for 2023, and it won that coveted award because it offers more value than any other smartphone on the market. I still think that's the case, actually. I think it's an incredibly it's an incredibly impressive phone for the price, and nothing could beat it, particularly the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Then we have the S24 Ultra, which is the best smartphone I've ever used. The display, the design, the AI features, the operating system, as a package, I think it is pretty much perfection. Then we have the Honor Magic V2, which is a foldable, and if Apple ever makes a folding iPhone, I think the V2 is a great example of what they would do because it's the thinnest, it's the most impressive foldable I've used so far. Even the crease is barely noticeable. Next up we have the Honor, and yes, it's Honor again, but they keep putting out really interesting phones. The Honor Magic Magic 6 Pro. That phone is cheaper than the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I think the only thing separating those two phones is the Apple ecosystem, which I'll get onto in a bit. Lastly, we have the Nothing Phone 2A in brackets, and that is 880 quid cheaper than the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And I think if you strip everything back, the main differentiating factor between those two phones is a better camera system on the iPhone. Everything else is comparable apart from possibly build quality, but the Nothing Phone 2A in brackets is 319 quid. So as you can see, the iPhone 15 Pro Max still holds its own as a flagship smartphone, but that's mainly because it's the default choice for a lot of Apple fanboys and fangirls. So in 6 months of use, let's get on to what I've really enjoyed about the phone and what I haven't enjoyed about that phone quite so much. Okay, let's talk about the stars of the show for the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and the first one is the 5x optical zoom, which is one of these lenses here. It was an absolute masterstroke of an inclusion because it's so useful in so many different scenarios. Whether you're taking a photo of someone or of a cityscape or a landscape, or you just want to get a bit more reach on a subject that's just over there, 5x is perfect. And it's an absolute beast in low light. This is my favorite feature on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The other thing worthy of mention is the A17 Pro chip, which is unlike me, I know, because I don't do benchmarks, I don't game on my phones, I don't do anything to push them basically. But you can't ignore the benchmarks, and the A17 Pro is just a brilliant chip. It continues to outperform and gives you loads and loads of headroom, which if you're spending a lot of money, like you do with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, that really matters. Next up, we have the switch to USB-C, which is, well, we've waited for it it for so long. And it is a big deal. Okay, we get faster transfer speeds, which matters when it comes to transferring big video files and things from this thing. It's just the convenience, the ability to unplug a pair of headphones or unplug my MacBook or my iPad and plug that cable into here. It makes a big difference. And the only remaining Lightning device I have is the AirPods Max, and every time I need to charge those headphones, I'm reminded of how annoying that cable is. And then we have the Apple ecosystem, which I do have to mention as a benefit and as a highlight for this phone because it makes such a difference to my everyday life in terms of my business. It speeds things up, it makes things easier, and it just works. The only problem is, and this is getting a bit orcs now, is that the Apple ecosystem, ironically, has landed Apple in rather hot water with its own government recently. You know what I'm talking about. And that brings me on to the things about this phone that aren't quite so good. Please, leave me alone. I don't really want to get into the legal side of this lawsuit against Apple because I don't fully understand it, and equally no one has been found guilty yet, so I'm not going to say anything in that regard. The premise is that Apple is making things too sticky with the iPhone, so if you buy an iPhone, apparently, according to this filing, you're being tied into all sorts of things, including the Apple ecosystem. Now, I am tied into the Apple ecosystem. Equally, I have my own brain, and nothing is stopping me from switching to a different smartphone. I might even stick with this Garmin Mark Commander, review coming soon. Make sure you subscribe not to miss that. But the point being, we can leave Apple. We don't have to use their stuff. So going back to the ecosystem being one of the best things about this phone over the last 6 months, equally, I can break free of it if I want to. And my experience with this does suggest that the Apple ecosystem isn't quite as sticky as I thought it was. Let's talk about titanium very briefly because there's not much you can say about it really, apart from the fact, if I can get my... This natural titanium colour is beautiful. It's lighter than the iPhone 14 Pro Max, absolutely. Both of those things are fairly irrelevant because the weight you just forget about because it just becomes the norm. The colour and the choice of titanium as a material disappears because most of us put a case on it. So does titanium make any difference to the user experience? No. Next up, the action button. I can guarantee if you get an iPhone 15 Pro Max, you'll set this to a few wacky things to begin with, and then you'll just set it to be the camera shutter, and then you'll just carry on using the camera shutter as you did previously by pressing the button on the screen. Basically, you'll never use this. I have to keep reminding myself that this exists, which kind of defeats the purpose. Then we have Monkey Island, or Dynamic Island as it is properly known. Okay, this was introduced with the iPhone 14 Pro Max and it is no longer a premium feature on the iPhone line, but it's... And yes, some developers have made fantastic use of the Dynamic Island. Uber and Ringo are stellar examples of that, but every other time I look at it, I just think it's only there to mask the fact that Apple will not change the size of the Face ID stuff and the FaceTime camera. Please do not buy the iPhone 15 Pro Max because of this. There is one other major disappointment with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and that is the battery life. Every other phone I mentioned earlier beats this when it comes to battery life. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, I think, is the last very good iPhone when it comes to battery life. Something has gone wrong. Whether or not it's the hardware or the A17 Pro, which I know I was praising earlier, or if it's iOS, I have no idea, but this does not last as long as the other phones that I test. And if you think that's because I'm using this more, that isn't the case. Every Android phone I review gets absolutely hammered for several days, and all of them beat this. That isn't right at all. Oh. Okay. Fine. I need to finally switch to the S24 Ultra properly, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell not to miss that video.